Prepare yourself for the ultimate gaming experience. April 5th through the 7th, the Midwest Gaming Classic returns to the Bard Center, downtown Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Dive into a vast world spanning over 250,000 square feet, showcasing the latest modern and retro game consoles, pinball machines, arcade games, tabletop, and so much more. Meet industry professionals, join engaging live panels, and explore the expansive vendor hall, the largest of its kind. Best of all, kids 9 and under are free. Grab your tickets online at MidwestGamingClassic.com or at the Bard Center. Welcome to the next level.
Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Midwest Gaming Classic podcast. I'm your host, Jason Garris, panel director of the Midwest Gaming Classic. This episode is part 2 of the previous episode that involves arcade game creators Jeff Lee and Tom Malinoswki as they continue to discuss various Gottlieb arcade video games, including the legendary game Q*bert. After the panel, you can watch about 15 minutes worth of Q*bert arcade gameplay. Enough of me talking. Let's jump right into this informative and entertaining panel from the 2017 Midwest Gaming Classic.
Gottlieb is often known for their pinball division, but they also had a video arcade division that created games like Q*bert. In this presentation, Jeff Lee and Tom Malinoswki will discuss creating those games at Gottlieb.
This is my old colleague, Tom Malinoswki.
Hello, everybody. I'm not artistic per se, but I was hired to be a programmer, so it was a fun thing to develop back in 81 when you had really primitive stuff. Go on.
Yeah, so most of you are probably familiar with Q*bert. That's my claim to fame. If it wasn't for Q*bert, no one would care, right? But besides that, we worked on some other games. The first game, well, the first full-blown video game we worked on, actually Tom was the programmer and designer of. It's called Argus. We are selling the story of Argus here. It was a fully completed game, but it was never released. And Galloping Ghost Productions and Tom and I and some of our other colleagues helped bring it back to life. There's the only existing prototype is back in the row there. You can play it today. And maybe Tom wants to tell us a little bit about it.
Well, yeah, we were trying to compete with the American video places like Williams. So we hired a veteran programmer who did another game called Reactor, and I was learning everything from him. I'd seen the movie Superman 2 the year before, but maybe that would be a cool idea to have a game where you're Superman. So even though we couldn't get the name Superman, we ended up creating our own superhero called Argus. I guess my main accomplishment there at Milestar was that me and this other guy were kind of like the front men doing what they were hoping was going to be successful. While in the back, Jeff and Warren Davis were throwing together this cute little character and having to jump on a cube. Ended up that was more successful than the Veterans game, which was called Reactor or Argus Superman, which was probably a super game, but at the same time, you know, maybe just too real and not really gamey like Q*bert turned out to be. So thanks to me and this guy named Tim being the kind of like the front person, that Warren and Jeff and Dave Steele were able to create this classic, which became kind of like the American Pac-Man. And I guess at that point I'll let you tell about that.
Okay, yeah, so Warren Davis, who was here last year or 2 years ago, he lives out in California now, he had been hired at Gottlieb and we helped out Tom on working on Argus, and I would just kind of be goofing around with graphics. Computer graphics was a new thing for me, and actually for most people at the time. We had some very primitive tools, and some of our people made some homegrown graphic tools. So I was taking that, and that's when I came up with the cubes. I mean, actually, I didn't design those cubes. It's a very ancient graphic device, but I built a pyramid and then thought there'd be a game there. I designed some characters to be on the cube, and at this point, Warren Davis saw it, and he was looking for a project or a programming exercise, and he kind of took that over, and out of that grew Cubert. So it was really a group project, as most of our efforts there were. There was a lot of cross-fertilization of ideas, people throwing in notions or suggestions, and Warren would take some, use some, he'd throw other ones out. Some of you who maybe played the arcade version of Cubert remember the thunking sound that happens when Cubert jumps off and there's this knocking. For instance, that was suggested by one of our techs, a guy named Rick Ty, who said, oh, you ought to put in this piece of pinball hardware down there. So they tried it out, and it was a novelty. People kind of liked that. So there was a lot of that going on. Another project that's represented here today is Three Stooges, and that was programmed by a guy named Sam Russo, and he and I designed the game. I did the graphics, Sam did the programming, and Tom assisted with some of the programming, even though he claims he doesn't remember much of it. But it's a very rare game, very few were actually produced. At the time, the industry was kind of on a downslide, and we actually shifted production to, I think, Us versus Them, which was a Laserdisc game. That was seen as maybe the wave of the future. So Three Stooges wound up on the short end of the stick there, and there's very few around. We're glad to see one here working. If you can get together with a couple of your friends, you can get the full-blown experience. Three Stooges at once trying to rescue their brides. Are there any questions?
They're all a little shy.
Yeah. I don't know what to say about Three Stooges is we were owned by Columbia Pictures, which has done all the Three Stooges stuff, and my only involvement was trying to create characters that sounded like the Three Stooges, something which could be real easy today. But back then, with the limited amount of memory, it was really hard to get somebody who could do an imitation of their voices, but then to digitize it in a way that would come out in an arcade game. That was something that was really hard to do back then. But we managed to sort of get close to, what they sound like, which is, I think, the key of the game. And that was my only real environment. The gameplay and the design was really Jeff and Sam's. And I guess it's a tribute to that great comedy team that they have a video game where they actually sound like that. So, it's one of those lost arts. And I guess
Yeah, evidently, we thought the Three Stooges was owned by Columbia Pictures, which was the company that owned Gottlieb. Turns out it was actually property of Mo Howard's son-in-law, a guy named Norman Maurer. And so he had to be consulted and approved the whole deal. It took a long time to iron that out. And he insisted that we use his voice guy, who was the authorized talent to do Stooges voices. And I'm not even sure in what format that would have been, maybe for cartoons or something?
yeah, that was it. Cartoons, he was the cartoon. They did Three Stooges cartoons.
Because all the Stooges were dead at that time. So they brought a guy into the studio. He recorded all the bits that you hear on this machine. That's all there is to say about Stooges. And one thing more I might mention about Sam Russo, the programmer of that, he's the guy that, the character in Q*bert, the little green guy, Slick and Sam, and Sam is named after that, Sam Russo. So Sam lives on, in several parts. Of course, he's still with us today, but he's not here today.
If I remember right, Q*bert had a weird controller.
The question is, Q*bert had a weird controller.
What's the typical controller?
It was diagonal instead of up and down, yeah.
Didn't somebody have a ball that had an easy ball to remove?
A trackball?
Yeah.
Q*bert never used a trackball.
That would have been Argus or would have been...
Yeah, Times Game.
Yeah, Argus had a trackball and so did the Reactor.
Does that have a harder programming for a trackball?
No, it's actually better in some ways because it translates directions perfectly as opposed to the trackball, which is 1 of 8 or 4. So...
I don't know. I never get that far. I can't get more than maybe 35,000 points on that game. And there was a guy in the Galloping Ghost recently who was doing a marathon. And we'll have to ask, maybe Doc remembers, who was doing the marathon recently at Galloping Ghost on Q*bert? Michael Dietrich. He came up from Louisiana, I think, right? Baton Rouge. Oh, here's another marathoner. There's Austin. He's a marathoner on Mad Planets. And Mad Planets is here. Mad Planets was designed, programmed by Dr. Kan Yamamoto, who died on March 31st of this year. We just learned of his death recently. So we made up this little sign to show our respects. We have a Mad Planets here. Give it a try. It's one of the 1,000 video games you must play before you die. So it doesn't get much more imperative than that. This picture is of Khan. He was here at the MGC 2 years ago, I believe. Probably his only appearance ever at an event of this nature. The first year he came up here, he could not be persuaded to come. He was in very poor health, but he showed up the next year looking very dapper. He enjoyed himself immensely, talking about the game, talking about programming in video games and other esoteric objects. So anyway, he passed away in Tokyo, Japan last week, and
any other questions?
Do you have any prototypes for any of these games? Like, how was the development process? Was it an early prototype of Q*bert that was quite different than what was released?
Well, I'm sure there was. I mean, obviously, one of the interesting things about both Reactor, Argus, and Q*bert is it was developed on this ancient piece of equipment called a blue box. It was the Intel development system, and boy, I mean, it was primitive even for its time. But yeah, to the credit of even Khan, he developed some stuff on that as well. But to Warren and me and Tim, that we were able to, and also Jeff too. He was developing all this artwork and text pixelization. Right, I mean, very blocky graphics there.
well, someone, I don't know if it was you or maybe Jim, wrote a utility. I used the Apple II, and there was a utility I had where I could build maybe in like 3 or 4 colors the character, at least where I could see them, and then that information was sent to an EEPROM burner, and everything was burned onto a chip. Yeah, it took like a half hour to do that, and then that chip was plugged into a prototype board, and then I could finally see the finished product on a monitor. So it was kind of a clunky system, but really it's all we had to go with at the time. Typically, I drew stuff on graph paper. Like here's a coloring book that I put out this last year. It shows like original sprites, and then I've blown them up real big. But that's what I worked with. It typically was a graph paper, light table for plopping animation. I kind of came from an old school animation background, doing cell animation and stuff like that, flipbooks and things of that nature.
Anyone else?
With retro gaming becoming popular again, are you guys like still designing any games or?
Well, we're looking into both some iDevice programming and maybe even an arcade if there's a market for it.
Yeah, we're starting out with baby steps on another project. And we had one project that we gave it a go and it kind of got stalled, so we started with something maybe a little simpler, trying to keep it easy. So we're in the midst of that, and Tom is writing code. Maybe today he'll even write some code and implement some of the graphics I sent him the other day. Some of it, this particular project may not be suitable for an arcade piece, but maybe as like an app on your phone or something like that. I'm looking at real, simple, easy games. Typically, that's what I like to play on computers or on my iPad. It's just real fast stuff that I don't have to put a lot of marathon time into.
So you didn't use any RAM-based development boards. You all had everything's 3-bump. No emulators or no RAM?
Yeah, obviously when we do with the Blue Box, we have RAM instead of ROM that would be downloaded in there, and then once we kind of want to put it in the field, all these units had to be ROM, EEPROM, and a little RAM, not much.
Because the Blue Box had RAM, so you didn't have to burn EEPROMs every time you wanted to try anything.
Right, actually more accurately, the board, the arcade board had RAM, and the Blue Box, all it did is pump it into the RAM and pretend to be a CPU. So that's sort of how it worked. But it involved taking the Blue Box, dumping it through what we call the in-circuit emulator, an ICE. I don't know if you ever heard that term.
Yeah.
And then it would pump it out into the RAM, and we'd run it, and it was only there while the power was on. And of course, in order for it to actually work in an arcade, you had to burn EEPROMs to make it stay, because it would never work as a RAM system.
Oh, of course, but just at least you weren't in the having to spend 5 minutes racing EEPROMs every time.
No, well, yeah, definitely for what Jeff was doing, because I don't think we had RAM sprites, but so he had to kind of like get it right on the Apple, send it over to EEPROM, and we plugged it in. But yeah, my code or Warren's or Tim's had to be pumped into the RAM, and we'd run it. We would move the sprites around on the screen, and
yeah, because the sprites were all fetched from some chips from the code, right?
Right.
Yeah. I got it.
Yes, so my tools as an artist did evolve over time and pretty quickly. So it was only the first few games where I was doing stuff on the Apple II, and then a couple of games where I was working on, burning this stuff onto EEPROMs. At some point, the first IBM PCs came out, and so we were all given our own machines to work with. And previously, the programmers, we had 2 Blue Boxes, I think, and there was maybe half a dozen or more programmers, and they all had to use the same machines. They had to timeshare, and it was like Tim Skelly. Of course, his game was supposed to be first out of the gate. He always had priority over anyone else, and which disgruntled some of the other programmers, as you can imagine. But at one point, once we had PCs, Jim Weiss written us utilities for the graphics. So I could see the graphics, build them in real time, and then animate them and all that. So that was tremendous godsend.
I just want to comment that the blue box, which had a fantastic amount of RAM. I mean, we had the most sophisticated blue box. Most of it was done on floppy disks, about the size of this. We had a hard drive. It was an amazing 5 meg. And it was the size of a file cabinet, and it had signs around it that said you could not smoke, because it would crash the hard drive.
Most of us smoked. A lot of us smoked back in that day.
In the office. Yeah.
I was a smoker. I mean, this is like 1981. It was so common. People smoking cigars, cigarettes, and we were in a common room. And if you were not a smoker, it must have been just horrible. Just being in that and then your clothes smelling. There was a programmer named Joel Krieger who did Caveman. If anyone's familiar with Caveman, it was a pinball video hybrid, and he was the programmer for that. And Joel was this little guy. He had come from Midway. Once I was out in the dock spray painting designs on the prototypes, like this sort of thing. And even though I was a smoker, I had enough sense to at least wear a mask. And Joel saw that mask, he thought it was the greatest thing. So he asked me for some x-rays, and he would wear them in the office. He would wear them in his car when he was commuting. And our hardware designer, June Young, swears that once he went to a party and Joel showed up at the party wearing like a gas mask because of the smoke. And maybe he knew what he was doing, because look at your poor Con, lifelong smoker, and he died of lung disease. So if you smoke, quit. It can be done. I quit 10 years ago.
I just want to say one funny thing about the Intel thing was, I was a young 26-year-old, and we had hired a veteran arcader, which was very rare back then. He had first dibs on the hard drive, and I'm saying we only had one hard drive. Like Warren did Qbert on the other blue box, which was a floppy disk, and he said the floppy disks were about the size of that, and not very, like 300K, I believe, is what they stored, which is amazing. Good enough for the game. But yeah, the Intel Blue Box was what made even the old, I don't know if any of you know old PC DOS, which everybody thinks is like ancient history, but PC DOS was sophisticated compared to the Blue Box commands. And so we had our veteran arcader doing our first arcade game, and we're all learning the Blue Box, and I'm learning it with him. And I'm playing with all the commands. What are commands? Erase all your files. So I initially did that after Tim had done a ton of work on it. And this thing did not have subdirectories like modern PCs. Everything was in one directory. So when you said erase files, not only did it not ask you, are you sure, which even DOS does, but and not only is it separated, but it just destroys everything. I mean, I'm amazed I didn't get fired that day. I remember the first few days when I'm destroying our veterans arcade's code, that he had to retype it, and I'm sure he wasn't happy with me. And I learned, don't submit that command again.
Better keep the questions coming, because our memories will be running out of anecdotes here, unless we're prompted. Any questions? To the best of my knowledge, it would be Columbia Pictures, which was the company that owned us. Columbia Pictures had purchased D. Gottlieb and Company, and they became Gottlieb Amusement Games. And then Columbia Pictures, shortly before we started, at some point was acquired by Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola were our ultimate corporate overlords. And so anyway, we were shut down in '84, and some of the rights, licensing rights, and some of the properties were acquired by a company called JVW, which was one of our vice presidents, Ron Waxman, our head of engineering, and a couple other principals there, and they took the video disc technology and started making flight simulators for the U.S. Navy. And they also evidently had the licensing powers. Because some of the products that I've seen, and Bradley over there has brought a bunch of items today from his collection. I mean, they licensed the hell out of Q*bert, and some stuff was done later, including, I think, cartridge games. And sometimes you'll see JVW as the licensee on some of these old cartridges. But they went out of business, and I guess everything reverted back to Columbia. And Columbia was subsequently acquired by Sony Pictures. So Sony is the ultimate overlord of Columbia. And Bradley has just bought a couple items today that say Columbia Pictures on from 2016. So that's who owns it.
Should we get royalties on that stuff?
I agree.
Yeah, on that note, I just want to say, I mean, everything that is cute about Q*bert, obviously is the man in front of you, and someone who isn't here, Dave, who's still alive, but he's not here, Dave Theo, who did all the swearing sound effects and all the cute sounds. I only made two contributions to Q*bert personally. One is Warren asked me how to do gravity, because I had to do gravity in Argus, so I taught him how to do gravity in a video game. It doesn't seem like much, but it's a big deal. That's why Q*bert falls like he's in a gravity world and everything. The only other contribution I noticed the other day is that the squash sound, I guess, when he gets hit by the ball, came from Argus. I mean, although again, it goes back to Dave Theo. But is the blob sound in Argus. So obviously Dave Theo went through a lot of trouble creating sounds for my game, a lot of cool sounds that never saw the light of day. And it was neat to see that he did reuse some of the better ones in Q*bert. And everybody probably hates that sound because it means you got hit by the ball, right?
Yeah, it's not as fun as the whoa.
That's a lot more fun, even though you're suffering the same fate. Yeah, David Thiel, he goes to conventions now and again, and I know he's done panels where he talks about sound making. He's still making pinball sounds, God bless him. And he talks about the Votrax chip and all the problems it gave him doing voice for, was it the Reactor? Anyway.
Oh yeah.
So when it came to Q*bert, he was trying to get some voice, get him to say a few simple things, and it just wasn't working out. And that's when he decided to go with the gibberish, because, I mean, his best efforts were coming out, except for the bang, were pretty much gibberish. So that's why he went with that. He just took it as, I don't know, a mandate from the Fates. And it worked out great because people love the gibberish. And I got a big kick out when I saw Wreck-It Ralph and the Q*bert and his frenemies are there. They're out of work, which was great. And at some point, Ralph is trying to get information, and what is the character? The Felix character says, "Hold on, I can speak Q*bertese," and he's like translating for it. I thought that was great. That was so spot on for. They really handled that well. The entire old Q*bert and Wreck-It Ralph, which I thought was good enough. I saw it a couple times. Whereas Pixels, man, I don't know what's going on with that movie. It was great that, I guess, Q*bert's in it, but I don't understand it. I don't know where they were going. It made no sense to me whatsoever, but...
And he talks English.
He talks English, yeah, that was bad.
That's wrong.
Yeah, that's all wrong.
What was the reaction when you found out that Argus existed?
I was overly thrilled. I mean, I spent a year on that game, and it just evaporated. You know, only thank God somebody. And the story is, as I understand it, somebody had a prototype Argus chips. I don't even think the board ran it anymore. And they copied it and they put it up the main. And somebody, because of Qbert, they have the engine, all they had to do is run the engine and my chips would run just as fine. And I'm sure they were pleased that it actually still ran. And as far as I know, the chips up there on MAME are perfect. And like the last one. So, yeah, I mean, it's like, I guess when you accept that your code is evaporated, it's gone. That's my only, I can't draw and I can't make sound effects. So all my work is esoteric, you know. You see it, but you don't really appreciate it. Especially today with all the sophistication, but back then the two things you had to do in the primitives, and to see that the code's still out there and still runs and still can play the game and it plays it just like it was 1980, I guess too, is when it was done. I just
tell them about Dave Bonecutter and the chips he
did he have Arena? I don't know. I think he had Arena. I don't think he had Argus. But yeah, I mean, he had a circuit board and everything. Yeah. Just go on the hardware side. How you always go back to Qbert in the gibberish. How you take a bad situation, which the voice chip in back in '81. This is not the one that's in Three Stooges. This is like very primitive. If you could make it talk, it would be like listening to a robot, a really bad robot actually. And Dave Thiel worked hard on that. And to use by accident the random gibberish that this chip makes is probably the best use of that chip, because it really cannot possibly talk any kind of decent English. All you have to do is hear the bye-bye and I'm turned on. That's all it says. That's all it ever says. And that took an amazing amount of work for Dave to get it to say that. So it became like, this is a terrible chip and really it's kind of useless, but it became central to what you really love about Qbert.
Any other inquiries? Yes, sir.
Do you have any input on the Qbert pinball machine?
Qbert's Quest?
Yeah.
No.
You had nothing to do with it?
No. Yeah, I'd like to see one of those. Do they have one here?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of rare.
Yeah, there were two divisions at Gottlieb, and obviously the pinball game first. They were a pinball company, and so they were always looking for some angle. And so it was natural. I think besides Qbert's Quest, they had ideas for some other Qbert pin-related things. I don't think Qbert's Quest did all that well. Yeah, pretty rare. Most of their product, my understanding, went to Europe. In the early 80s. France was a big market. So maybe some of those games are out there. Presumably, Terry Dorzap, who did the marquee and cabinet artwork, probably did the pinball glass and stuff in the field. It would either been him or a guy named David Moore. They were the two main artists we used at that time. Occasionally they would step to someone outside. It was probably David or Terry. So that's the closest involvement I had with it. Have you seen the movie Crawl?
No, that's an interesting story.
Yeah, terrible movie. Probably the game is better than the movies. But actually, that movie is so bad, it's some kind of cult status just for that. There's a comic book I read called Knights at the Dinner Table. It's about people who play role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, and that sort of thing. It's published up here in Milwaukee. And so it's about all these typical role-playing game people, maybe kind of geeky, kind of nerdy, perhaps. And anyway, there's a character named Weird Pete, and he runs a place called the Games Pit. It's supposed to be your local friendly neighborhood game store. And the artwork in this comic strip is terrible. It's all about the writing. If you got good writing, it'll carry terrible art every time. And they pull that off so well. And occasionally they use clip art, and I remember one interior shot in the games clip, and they worship some terrible movie called Hawk the Slayer, which I've never seen either. It's a fantasy movie from the 80s, so they're always making references to that. Anyway, there's a clip art of the Kroll cabinet in Weird Pete's game shop. So I guess that's on the same level as Hawk the Slayer in terms of being awful. So awful it's good. But anyway, our game was designed by Matt Householder and a guy named Chris Krubel. And unusual in that it had 2 programmers. And Matt was asked by our VP Ron Waxman once why this game needed 2 programmers when every other game only needed 1. And Matt told him, well, it's because I do the good guys and Chris does the bad guys. And they kind of fit their personalities. Because Chris was a very dark, cynical person, very troubled, very twisted, very funny guy. And Matt's wonderful himself. Anyway, Chris passed away a number of years ago. Matt is still with us. He's out in California. He's been in the game business for many years. Done a lot of cartridges and computer games. So they made the best game they could from that turkey of a movie. And I did the graphics. I know Doc's got one at the Galloping Ghost. It's not up here. Yeah, maybe not the greatest game, but like I say, better than the movie. And a hard game, though. I can't get past the third screen. Or maybe once I got into the big room where the beast is, and I get wiped out immediately. It's a very tough fight.
I know you mentioned that comic you read about Dungeons and Dragons. Do you guys play?
I do. I play.
You still play?
I still play. Do you live?
I'm in Riverside.
Oh, you're in Riverside. Wait a minute. Yeah, you do tabletop? What, do you run the game?
Not right now, no.
Do you run the game then?
I do.
This concept
Yeah, one of my friends is running.
This is the other artist.
Always looking for new.
What night?
Usually Saturday.
Saturday night? That's nice. Yeah, I'm currently running the game. I started using this game engine, or this thing called Vassal. Anyone familiar with Vassal? It stands for Virtual Advanced Squad Leader. Me and my buddies used to play all these Avalon Hill games, all the, strategy board games back in the 70s and 80s. And Avalon Hill was the king of that. All these Tom and I used to play some of those games. So the hard thing is always finding players for that sort of thing. So these people who were advanced squad leader players invented Vassal, which is like a virtual living room. And you get on the server, you can play around the world at the same time. And there's all these modules, like thousands of modules. You can download them. You can even write your own. It's relatively easy to do. That comes from a guy, of course, who would never attempt to do it. Anyways, I met some of my friends, and I started doing this online. And we met people online, and we were doing all these games, and then we decided to do some D&D. So there's another thing called Roll20. So we're using Roll20. And I volunteered to game master that. So we're doing old school second edition AD&D. But I'll play 5th or whatever they're up to now.
We've been running 3.5.
Okay. All right, sounds good. I'll give you my card. Contact me, let me know. What's your name?
Sarah.
Sarah.
Yeah.
Anything else? Doc? Yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up. You want to say something about these things? Or?
Well, I wanted to...
Sorry.
MGC. Thanks.
I just wanted to say thank you both for coming out and being part of this. And
Doc, thanks for having us out.
Thanks again.
It's so amazing to hear all the stories and the creation of these games that have been around since the 80s, and everybody just absolutely loves them and has had endless amounts of fun playing Q-Bert, and more recently Argus, people getting a chance to play it. So thank you for both of you for everything that you've done for the industry and everything. So thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank people like you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank people like you for saving my game.
As we know,
Either.
we're not going to be around forever. Con is
small ones.
true for that. So get out here while we can. While people
Remember the games and share all that, and maybe we'll make some new memories along the way. So.
thank you, everybody.
Hello, I'm Aaron.
And there you go. That was part 2 of the trip down memory lane for both Jeff Lee and Tom Malinoswki as they discussed what it was like working at Gottlieb. And I'd like to thank you for joining me with this episode and every other episode that you have either listened to and or watched with me involving the Midwest Gaming Classic. I greatly appreciate you taking the time out of your day, or perhaps even listening while you're doing something, or you're at work, or you're driving somewhere. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much. And with that said, that's it for this episode. And until next time, take care, stay safe, and game on.
When you decide to come out to this type of function, this type of experience, this type of gathering, Marvel phenomenon, there is only one event to attend, the Midwest Gaming Classic, where you and the games are one. Gaming Classic. It's not just child's play.